While climate change heightens competition for the already limited resources, many non-climate stressors are also putting immense pressure on our food system. Recently, all eyes are on the wheat shortage, as experts warn it could spark a global food crisis. The Ukraine crisis and increasingly severe weather occurrences are putting tremendous pressure on the world's supply of wheat and are threatening global production. What caused the problem, and how are nations addressing the shortage? Why is wheat such a big deal now? Wheat is the third most prevalent crop in the world after maize and soybeans. It continues to be an essential part of food security today as one of the most traditional, affordable, and adaptable grains. In order to guarantee a sustainable global food supply for the present and coming generations, this nutrient-rich grain is crucial. Wheat has long been a common ingredient, particularly in developing nations but even in industrialized nations. Today, flour is made from more than 80% of the world's wheat. Russia and Ukraine are both major players in the extremely competitive global wheat market. These two countries alone account for just less than 30% of the world's wheat exports, and are frequently referred to as the breadbaskets for most of the world. The majority of the wheat they produce is sent to North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Among the top importers are Egypt, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Turkey, and Yemen. Additionally, 20% of the total food commodities purchased by the World Food Programme in 2020 came from Russia and Ukraine, which significantly aided in preserving global food security in underdeveloped countries. Did the war in Ukraine cause a wheat crisis around the world? When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the situation significantly changed. Experts have been raising the risk of wheat shortages almost since the start of the war. At first, they worried that Ukrainian farmers might not be able to finish harvesting all of their current crops or even start any new ones this year, disrupting local and global supply systems. However, after almost 4 months of fighting, it is now obvious that the damage could be considerably more than predicted and could perhaps jeopardize the world's wheat supplies. While wars may in fact immediately cause food shortages in the countries directly affected, the long-term impacts of war on the food chain will always be felt on a larger scale. The world is on the verge of a food disaster. However, the predicament we are in is more intricate than we might realize. According to Robinson Meyer of The Atlantic, there isn't a global wheat shortage. The problem of wheat growing in the incorrect areas is widespread. In fact, Ukraine is still producing the grain, at least for the time being. However, estimates indicate that because to the ongoing conflict, the fate of more than 55 million tons of wheat, the whole amount produced by Russia and Ukraine together, is uncertain. The war-torn nation's main issue is not how to generate it, but rather how to get it out. More than 90% of Ukraine's wheat exports make it out of the nation through the Black Sea. However, Russian soldiers have now sieged the ports, forcing the country to export its commodities by rail, barge, or truck, which, however, can only handle a small fraction of the exports in comparison to cargo ships. However, there is another element endangering wheat harvests in Russia and Ukraine. Together, the two nations generate almost a third of the world's ammonia and potassium exports, which are crucial components of fertilizers. A price increase of about 30% was caused by a shortage of key raw materials fueled by the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Additionally, energy prices have risen due to sanctions against Russia, raising the price of fertilizers. Together, the two nations generate almost a third of the world's ammonia and potassium exports, which are crucial components of fertilizers. War isn't the only problem. The war in Ukraine is just escalating a problem that existed before the nation was invaded, despite having catastrophic effects on the world's food supply chain. Over the past 2 years, both climate change and the COVID-19 outbreak have severely harmed crops worldwide, hurting exports. Growing food costs, global poverty, and hunger in the world's least developed countries. Events resulting from climate change are becoming more and more important in terms of food insecurity. Due to heat waves and droughts that struck the US and Canada, the second and third largest wheat exporters after Russia, in summer 2021, there was a global wheat scarcity. Similar to this, China had the worst agricultural circumstances ever last year as a result of climate change. Record-breaking rains harmed about 30 million acres of crops and caused more than 18 million acres, or approximately 1/3 of China's total winter wheat acreage, to be planted later than usual. This year, the situation is considerably more dire, and India is the center of attention. A record-breaking heat wave is currently affecting the South Asian nation, hurting food crops, wheat yields in the worst affected areas have decreased by nearly half, and negatively affecting the already fragile economy. In March 2022, as Russia invaded Ukraine, concerns about a possible wheat shortage arose. Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared that India will fill the void created by the war in the market for wheat exports. In fact, during its Rabi season, which occurs in winter and typically occurs in October and November, India set records for wheat output the previous year, and it was on course to have another fruitful year. Modi, however, decided to take a backseat in the face of the protracted heat wave that has brought the nation to its knees and severely devastated its crops. According to several Indian farmers, the excessive heat has already irrevocably damaged 10% to 15% of their crops, and the situation does not appear to be improving. In fact, even if harvesting has just concluded, the heat may weaken plants and prevent them from producing any grain by the time the following Rabi season begins. India was harshly criticized for choosing to prioritize the domestic market by limiting exports. Although the nation is not among the major breadbaskets in the world, analysts think that denying other nations access to its supply at a time when wheat supplies are already severely constrained just makes the problem worse. Wheat prices spiked 40% between February and April 2022 as a result of the global supply deficit. By restricting the export of staple foods like wheat, maize, and other grains, 20 governments have so far restricted roughly 17% of the world trade in calories as a result of the economic instability and food insecurity brought on by the invasion. Along with India, Indonesia recently enacted a restriction on palm oil exports in an effort to shield domestic consumers from the war's skyrocketing prices for vegetable oil. However, analysts worry that such widespread protectionism may have a knock-on effect and raise prices globally, feeding the world's poorest nations poverty and hunger while triggering a much-feared global food catastrophe that would once again impact the poorest people. The UN has warned that as long as the war continues, an additional 7.6 to 13.1 million people could go hungry, bringing the total number of hungry people from the current 276 million to more than 323 million. This precarious situation, coupled with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, which are still widely felt around the world, could further deteriorate conditions.